I think this dovetails really nicely with, I mean, the article that I found this week that really starts talking about the origins or the burgeoning field of contemplative science, which I feel like, Joe, you were way ahead of the curve on. You've been thinking about this stuff in the same ways that the scientists have been thinking about it, since you started your journey. And it's this new interdisciplinary field, which even that in and of itself, instead of siloing off these different realms of knowledge, bringing them all together is also something you do in your day-to-day life all the time. So it makes sense that you were already thinking about this. But it's this so contemplative science, it's this field that is trying to study practices like meditation, prayer, and psychedelic use affect the mind and the brain and the body and how those are connected. And I think one of the things that all three of those sort of have in common is the capacity to almost force you outside of your regular way of thinking into a completely different mindset for a while. And then once you have that new mindset, I mean, I think it's part of the reason why it's been disregarded for so long is you can have this new mindset, but then you go back and you talk to all these people who haven't had that same experience and still have that same limitation. So it's almost like talking two different types of languages to folks. But now this contemplative science, it's trying to find insights from like psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, religious studies to sort of see how the mechanisms behind these practices and their effect on like mental health, well-being, cognitive functions. And, first started focusing on just mindfulness, but now it's really trying to get into advanced meditation, things like what the levels of meditation that, Joe, I think you're experiencing pretty regularly now because you've sort of trained your brain to the point where it's at that subconscious level that you can do this, you can access it. Buddhist monks have been doing it for years. And so they're just looking to like, how do we study these practices and how do we validate it and make them more accessible to folks? And I think that it's so exciting because I think that's also part of what we're trying to do here. You came all guns blazing on our first client call, in February talking about this. And it was like aiming a fire hose at a teacup at the time.
What a great analogy. That's a really great analogy. A fire hose and a teacup. That sounds, even from you're going to burst the teacup. Did we burst? We probably bursted the teacup, bursted a few teacups. That's a lot. And I mean, even just listening to you say all of those things, science and like all of the terms, that's a lot to swallow, right? That's a lot to even begin to think about wrapping your head around. It's like part of me is like, man, that's like, can't even begin to even think about the first thing you said, much less all the 15 things you said that they're trying to wrap into one thing, right? And, what I'll say to that is I feel like there's a lot more practical. So like the interesting as humans, we need to analyze and scientifically prove and create data that then gives us a reference point for validation that says this is good, which I've been the first, like I needed that absolutely in the beginning of my journey. I wasn't going deeper than, a day or two without saying like, what's happening here? How do I prove this with data? Because if I don't see the data, it's not real, right? And so that's the first thing that I had. That's one of the first hurdles I had to get beyond was to see the data and believe the data. And then ultimately, as I experienced things that validated what the data said would happen first and then what would happen next, I'm like, wow, this is happening to me. This is happening to me. Like it makes sense. Like I don't need to get into that depth, right? But as society and humanity, like it's needed to have these elements of science with data behind it to provide that foundation of proof and truth that everybody looks for from a scientific perspective to be able to say, okay, I can go further, I can go deeper, let me try and see what's here, right? And so, I think that's, and the reality is I wasn't, trying to look at all those scientific elements and pull it together. Like that's not what I was doing. Were there elements that needed to get validated through quantum physics and through some level of epigenetics? Yes. And thank you, Joe Dispenza. Thank you, Deepak Chopra. Thank you, Wayne Dyer. Thank you, Bob Proctor, and all these authors and speakers and writers that really helped me kind of formulate that understanding. And for everybody, it's different. Everybody's going to have their own path. But yeah, like there's so much more than just using meditation as like a stress relief. But before even getting there, as you said, Riley, you need to have a point of reference. You don't know what you don't know, right? And so as I think Einstein said it, like there were all these people that came in and because they didn't know, they achieved all these great things, right? Like the 4-minute mile. Nobody thought the 4-minute mile was possible until someone did it. And then all of a sudden, all these other people did it, right? That's a limitation, right? You can't go beyond this. Well, watch me, let me do it, right? And then we did it. And so the more we understand these limitations in our lives, and the reality is that almost all of us are, our entire conscious awareness is in every moment is driven by the limitations that we've accepted. Very simple. That is our life, whether it's our finances, whether it's jobs, whether it's our personal lives, whether it's our relationships, whether, no matter what it is, as soon as you say you can't, limitation. As soon as you say any of that, limitation, right? But when you believe, and you talk to any of the most successful people on the planet, they'll say, I believe, no matter what. Everybody said I couldn't do it, but I believe. They're the ones that broke beyond that. They're the ones that they're like, wow, look what they achieved, but that perspective didn't exist. That perspective wasn't there. And yes, we as society need to, just need to see somebody do it first before we can say we can do it. That's why we look at, the athletes and all these people that have all accomplished these great feats. Why do we put them on such a pedestal? Because they've broken beyond the limitations. They've broken beyond all the, Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and, all these people and Patrick Mahomes, like all these people are doing all these things that nobody saw. I'm like, oh my God. Very simply, if you break it down to the common denominator between every one of them, they all broke beyond a limitation. And all of the world is like, oh my God, like, wow. But it's literally like the common denominator is there was limitations and they broke beyond them. And so can we find those limitations within our own life, one limitation at a time, break it down and remove that from something that allows that we're subconsciously allowing to run our life?